Liberty sees me, it stands by me, and celebrates me for who I am.
When I come into the office, I feel that I belong here.
I don't have to be corporate America Gabby. I can just bring Gabby to work.
Reach your potential and find a job you love at Liberty Mutual. We offer development training, rich benefits, and a culture that lets you bring your whole self to work, so you can pursue your tomorrow today. Ready to consider a career at Liberty Mutual? Find out how at libertymutualcareers.com.
When one of the best soccer coaches of the country is just a guy. When teaching the game is more important than being a coach. When the gender don't matter and the interest to learn from everyone will probably stay forever. Then we are talking about Neil. Neil was my guest in episode 19, and we explored a bit of his long journey as a soccer coach in North America. Well, let's say soccer teacher. Walkie Talkie Podcast episode 19 is that. And I'm very happy to have another guest on a very special place today, which is Neil. Welcome to the Walkie Talkie Podcast. Neil, how are you today?
I'm good. I'm feeling refreshed after a few days of camping. Somewhat without football. I don't know if we can ever get without football, but somewhat without football and just some time in the water. So I'm so refreshed today.
Yeah, we will probably not have this episode without football or soccer, how you say here. We're sitting, where are we at the moment? I forgot the name. It's the
Island View Beach, Island View Regional Park,
Yeah, on Vancouver Island. And we're sitting in a very nice Westphalia Volkswagen. I'm thankful that we can figure out if this is probably an option for the future as a studio, because I'm thinking about making my van in Europe or build it into a studio. Neil is the guy who I stayed around the last couple weeks or months, it's probably now. And do you remember how we met and where?
Well, we met in Whitehorse, the Yukon.
Yeah.
Way up there when you were working. And I'm not sure how we connected. I don't know if that was through Sam Samuelson, who was my assistant coach, and if she contacted you or you were in contact with her. But yeah, you appeared at a gym to watch one of our Canada Games sessions, girls that are 13 through 18, 19. And you probably thought, this Canadian guy, what is he saying? He doesn't use the same language as me.
Exactly.
So many things are different, except the ball was rolling. I guess that's the common thing.
Yeah, that's the common thing. And I was looking for experience in coaching soccer in English. That was one of my biggest goals, doing that in Canada. And when I was in Whitehorse, I reached out, I sent mails to, I think, Whitehorse United and asked them if they need a coach. I would be interested in an exchange and would like to learn how to coach in English. And I'm sorry, but I can't remember the name of the guy. But he sent me email and said you have to text Neil because he's the guy. And so I texted you, and you say, I will be around in a couple of days. And then we met, not knowing at this point that we will spend a lot of time together on Vancouver Island in Victoria.
Yeah. Yes.
You are a soccer coach, obviously. You are, tell us a bit about you, where you're from, where you're born. How did you came to this beautiful country? How did you find your way to soccer and then coaching?
Yeah, well, that's a bit of a story, I suppose. I was born in Leeds, England. My parents are both British, but we came over when I was nearly 3. So I wasn't speaking at the time, so I didn't have an accent to lose. So I just picked up the Canadian accent, and more the East Coast, although my mother, who still lives in the East Coast, says I now sound like a West Coaster. So, but we came to Canada, I think 1970 or so. And then, of course, growing up in Canada, you have the hockey dream. Yeah. So I wanted to be a professional hockey player, and more specifically, a professional goalie. So all the great goalies of the NHL were my heroes back then. And we played a lot, street hockey, ball hockey, and then a bit on the ice. I really didn't play that much on the ice, just a few years. And then in grade 7, so I was probably 13 or so, I don't know why I started, but I just went out for the junior high soccer team. It was the first year, and I like to say I made it, but probably they picked everyone. I just can't remember. And that's when I started playing soccer. And I think the case was I either didn't try out for the junior high hockey team, or I didn't play, but I never played in a league again of hockey, and then just went full on soccer and was placed on a team just because I was neighbors with the coach or something, somewhat close, and he could give me a drive. But the team that he was coaching had all these players that were maybe a year older than me. And I remember his Italian gentleman, Camillo Di Quinzio, and I remember his line was, "I'll take Neil because I can give him a lift." There was no, that was the only standard that I could meet at the time. Yeah. And I lived next to a fellow named Peter Walsh, who was a very good player. So, and I knew Peter. So I think Camillo just said, "Okay, well, if I'm going to take Peter, I may as well take Neil." So that was what started my soccer career after the school soccer. And then after that, I was just hooked. Met the right people. I think there's moments of ignition for us whenever we become, call it, passionate about.
Yeah.
And I think I've had a number of moments of ignition that has kept me going within the sport, and still doing it today at 55. So I'm incredibly fortunate and grateful to Camilo for setting an environment up that I felt safe in and that I could play.
Yeah.
And then I just continued played for my province in Nova Scotia, and played university, played at St. Mary's University to start. And then in Canada, back in the mid 80s to early 90s, we had a pro league. And then, so I was drafted in the pro league, and had the pleasure of playing for my provincial team, or our city team. The Nova Scotia Clippers. It was only around for 1 year. It was Canada's a pretty big country, and the expense of going from one end to another end was quite a bit. So we went bankrupt after one season, right. And then I was picked up by another team. So it's
probably not the only team where that happened.
No, that's true. Yeah, there were a number of them.
A lot of trying. Yeah,
a number of them in the country, and then from there, when I ended playing, I just decided. That coaching was the route that I was going to go. In fact, I had changed from business and computer science at St. Mary's to go to a Dalhousie University. It's still in Halifax, and I went into education, elementary education, and then physical education. So I kind of went that teacher route, and I still think that's what I'm doing today. Like, I don't see myself as a coach. I see myself as a teacher.
That's a very, very big difference. Yeah.
It just happens that we're most of the time we're on a green classroom.
But I think we're a good picture.
I think we are teachers first. If we're not, then I think we, especially if we're in youth development, or we're over here in the development area, then I think when we believe that we're coaches, and then I think we can start to feel like we're too much, we can have too much influence, because North American sports, of course, like basketball and football, you have so much influence on the game that you think you have to be like that. And but I think as a teacher, you recognize, you do what you can to teach in a lesson, and then you let them play.
When did you start coaching? Which age?
I think my first time I was probably...
Because I see a lot of young people here just playing and coaching. It's kind of a normal thing. Yeah. Did you start like that early as well?
Yeah, I think I was maybe 19 or 20. I was pretty young, because the first team that I coached with a friend of mine, my brother, I had to recruit my brother to come and play in goal. So, and he was 15 or 16 at the time, and I recruited him because he was one of the kids on a mountain bike or that was jumping and getting in accidents, and he had no respect for his body. That's what I said. You have no respect for your body. Come play goal for me.
Yeah.
You have no problem diving at someone's feet. And he came, and he was great. But yeah, so I must have been probably around 19 or so was my first team. And then you just continue working camps and doing bits here and there as far as a coach. And then really went full time. Probably when I finished with playing with Montreal, I was probably 26, 27 years old, and then kind of went full time, or as best you could at the time.
And at one point, you coached also in the States.
Yeah.
How was that experience?
Yeah, it was good. I came to Victoria to do my master's in coaching, or master's in education with a focus on coaching studies.
Yeah.
And then at the same time, I was attending the National Coaching Institute, which was like an 8-month residential program, classroom sessions all the time, mentor coaches that would help you. And then they gave you a team to coach as well. And after that, I had all this information, and I wanted to really coach year round, get a specific team and stay focused on that team. And a friend of mine had gone to the States, and I thought, okay, this is the only way to do it. So I started applying for jobs down there. I think I applied for maybe 60 jobs and didn't get anything. In the meantime, I was working with the national women's team, but I had no experience in the States, so they weren't hiring some Canadian guy. It didn't matter what he'd done. And then one time, I just through a contact, I got an interview at the University of North Dakota, and they were starting a program. So I was their first coach, and they were Division II at the time in the NCAA, and so I had to build a team and start kind of fresh there, which was a great experience. Because then after, when you're in that system, now you just want to kind of climb the ladder.
Yeah.
Because that's what there's 1,000 universities down there.
Yeah.
And you just want to climb the ladder. But at the time, Canadian being in the US, didn't have a visa.
Right.
And didn't have a green card. I could get a temporary visa, 1-year visas, and my wife couldn't get a visa. So she was in Winnipeg, 3 hours away from me. And then we decided, okay, that's going to be it. And we were going to pack it up in the States. And then I looked at the NCAA job site, and there was a couple of jobs. So I sent a note off this is the beginning of email, so long ago, to a friend saying, what are the chances of a Division II Canadian getting these jobs? They were Division I jobs. And for 2 real reasons, he said, not likely, Seji. I think that was the opening line. It's the one thing I remember. He says, Jimmy, who's a guy I ended up working with later, he's in line for this job, and his assistant coaches, who are husband and wife, are in line with this job. Yeah. So it just triggered something in my brain. I said, well, if they get the job, will Jimmy need an assistant? Because he was already at a big school. Yeah. And he said, well, I'll give him a call. The next thing you know, I'm at University of Southern California, and Ricky and I could be in the same spot. So now we're living in 100 meters from the beach in California, and stayed there working with a fellow named Jim Millender for 3 years. It was awesome. And then got a job in Montana as a head coach at the University of Montana. So we hit the prairies, the beach, and the mountains before. And then I think it was 11 years ago, we came back to the island. And we always knew we wanted to come back to the island. Yeah. And start here. But living in the States at that time was great.
Nice. For how long you stayed then in total?
Yeah, it was 11 years. So I think it was 2 years in North Dakota. Yeah. And then 3 years at Southern Cal, and then must have been 6 years or just over 6.
To give the listeners a bit more an overview about soccer in North America, because there's a lot of people from Europe listening. I struggled a lot at the beginning, but that's why I'm here as well, to figure out how's the whole system working. Because in Europe, you have the club system, and there's billions of clubs, and that's the system how it goes. In North America, it's very different. Can you give us a short explanation, like how that works? Like, how's the player going from university, high school, club? How's it working?
Yeah, well, 2 words in there.
Good working.
There you go. Because one word was working. I'm not sure if it is working. But it definitely has its process. And the other one is short. I'm not sure if there's a short explanation. Yeah. I mean, kids still play club soccer here at all different levels, but it's not, there's typically not a professional team above it unless you're one of the 3 MLS clubs. And I'm assuming that our new CPL, our new league, pro league, will soon have academies underneath. But most is just recreational user pay programs. And then as they get closer to universities will recruit, because I think unlike Europe, where it might be university and club. That's what you may do, and maybe university becomes a priority.
Yeah.
There's a lot of players that get a chance to play for the university, and that becomes their main development opportunity. So they spend 4 years in the States. They can play 4 years or 5 years in Canada, playing for the university, training year round. Well, not year round, but except for summer holidays, and really having a good experience. And that becomes the pinnacle for many. And then there's some that from the university get a chance to play and get recruited or go to a combine and play professionally.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's like kind of everybody goes to university at one point. And then you have to decide like in the mid-20s when you finished your university. Depends how long you study, but you have only 5 years you can play for the university, right? Yeah. And then you have to decide if I want to continue. I have to choose a club. And how is that working? Is it working, or is it like a lot of players are kind of done with mid-20s then and don't find anything? And
unfortunately, there's a lot a lot of players that don't play beyond university. I mean, it is a really intense 4 or 5 years. And I don't know if they're just tired of it or burnt out. And only in some places do players kind of continue on. And I think some of those areas are ones where the university is part-time. So out here on the West Coast where I coach, I mean, we are from really in 3 days, we will start our preseason and we will play our season. Then we'll go all the way till the end of April or the end of March. And we're say it's intense, but it's ongoing. So it's there the whole time. Where on the east coast of Canada, in Nova Scotia, let's say, they start much later than us. They'll start in maybe 3-4 weeks. They'll have a short preseason, a week and a half, and then they'll play their games. And then players will not typically train 4 or 5 days a week. They'll go back to their club teams. Yeah. And they'll be with that club team until the following August. And those players tend to continue on playing in local leagues. And it might be because they're not burnt out of the university environment of training, in one environment all the time. Be an interesting study, I think, to look at those numbers. And the university in the States is even more intense because the money is involved. There is bigger money because of the big sports. Yeah. So the expectations are really high on players, but often that's it for them. They just don't play afterwards, which is very sad because they've developed this skill set.
I mean, you're in a perfect age.
Yeah. And the problem is there's so few opportunities. In Germany, there'd be, the top tier, then multiple tiers down of teams playing it on the men's side and on the women's side. And we don't have that where people can make a few dollars while continuing to play.
Is it I hope I can talk to players as well at one point. But is it a lot of them have the dream or the thought to go to Europe if they want to continue playing after university? Is that the goal?
I think many more now would love to do that, but I don't think they see the entry point. I believe that they feel the door is closed. Like there's no way to get to Europe because they don't know the agents, or they don't have someone over there that's linked to a club, or maybe the language gets in the way of them doing it. And then I think the other part is it's just the expectation of, finish high school, go to university, get your degree, and then just get out in the workforce. And that's the process. And very few choose to go on and continue to play. Really take that chance.
And I mean, there's probably not much who get a pro contract in Europe. Like you have to find ways to get connected and then maybe find your way. Yeah, to get that. Because the European system as well, because I know you travel often to Europe and have exchange courses there. What is the benefit you see in the North American system? Is there something where you think like this is a good thing compared to the European system?
Well, I think it's there's more opportunities perhaps for young players, or there is the opportunity. I'm not sure if it's even more opportunities, but there's the opportunity where they fall out of kind of the top team and they're able to get back in. and find a new place. So there are those opportunities, not as I won't say cutthroat, but more unforgiving maybe in Europe.
Yeah.
That if I'm a player at 16 and one club doesn't see me at that level and I get released maybe after spending a few years there, then is there a way that I can get back into the next club? Some clubs are set up to help with that transition. Other clubs aren't set up. It's just you're not good enough and we're bringing someone else in. Where here it's such a small, speak about Vancouver Island and British Columbia, it's such a small population of decent players that if you fall out of favor in one team, you're still around, you're still playing, and coaches still see you.
Yeah.
Because there's not 100,000 players that in our country that are playing at that level.
Yeah.
So the pool is smaller, so you might be seen again to get back into that top level if you keep developing.
Yeah. Would you see the problem coming in North America if you had a bigger pool?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah.
I think because coaches, you become more dispensable, I think, as a player, that a coach can get rid of you, bring someone else in, and not look back. A coach doesn't have to look back. They can just keep looking for the next best player.
Yeah.
So because there's just so many players, and that might happen in some of the bigger provinces, like in Ontario, that might happen. But there's certainly some good things happening in Ontario. They're the majority of our national team. They're the majority of our pro players.
Yeah.
So, but that could be sheer numbers as well. Survival of the fittest, or survival of the luckiest. Who knows?
Yeah. You never know. Yeah. Let's turn it around. What do you think is the benefit of the European system then?
I think the fact that there's a clear structure that you can see. You can see it. The pyramid is there. It's not driven so much by the families and the player to finance it themselves. If you get to a certain level, then you're part of a pro club structure, and the training typically is good, and you can see the pathway. It's pretty clear. Over here, sometimes you can't see that pathway because it's disjointed, or there's some connections that are missing. But I think in Europe you get the structure, and it's visible, and there's a lot of history around it, so you see it. Yeah.
It's very interesting to listen to you, because yesterday I had a nice conversation with a friend and colleague from you, and I told him that I will interview you, and he said Neil is one of the guys, if you look up his Vita online, it doesn't show at all what a great person and coach he is, because he's a person, he never talks about himself. And it's pretty nice to have you here talking about yourself and your experiences and what do you think. This is pretty cool.
Oh, that's nice to hear. I mean, it is.
Yeah. I mean, this is my experience too, because you're very grounded and a very nice person to be around and learn. And it's cool to hear a bit from you.
I always say if you get me talking about football, then I won't shut up. But it's just it's getting me going. Yeah. But I think everyone has a past, and I enjoy listening to other people's stories more than selling my own or telling my own. I always feel like a friend of mine who lives on the island. He had an expression. He says, "I'm just a guy." And I feel that I've been involved in soccer. I've been so fortunate to do the things I do and have a great family, but I'm just a guy.
Yeah.
And, my story isn't that glamorous. It's just, I just went through the years. I'm just now older. Doing the same thing.
Absolutely. But it doesn't mean that it's not interesting or special but it doesn't mean that it's not worth it to share.
Yeah. Well, I've been trying to convince myself of that, but just a guy.
That's fine. Well, that's the podcast for as well. Because that's what I say. Everybody has a nice story and has something to tell. Even more for just guys.
I think about that when I'm on a plane. You never know who you're sitting next to. The person you could be sitting next to an 80-year-old gentleman or a lady, and my gosh, they've got years of stories, and you have no idea what they've been through, and just them holding on to it is just. It's just so cool to think that we're all so distinct, and we've all got our own stories.
Is there something where you really struggled in the couple last years in this field of being a soccer, let's say, teacher?
Maybe flipping into the coaching mode when you have to, and I have to during the season, because I want to stay process focused, and of course, if you don't get a result, and then the players they don't wonder what's going on, but they want to get results. That's their prime motivator, is to win games. And it's not my prime motivator anymore. My prime motivator is to help them get to a level where they can put themselves in contention to win games. And that's kind of the teacher side of me. So I think sometimes I take the pressure of the players by trying to release the pressure from the players. And I think sometimes near the ends of season, it's like I'm feeling pretty heavy while still trying to be pretty bright. Because I'm trying to take the pressure off of them all the time. And because I can stay process focused. But it's tough for a young player, because hey, I was a young player and I just wanted to win. And if I wasn't winning, then it would put pressure on myself, and then and my teammates would be doing the same. So having a coach that can try to pull that away from them, that's the tough part. And I find in that coaching role, I put it on myself. So much easier when we finish the season, we're playing exhibition games. I'm at complete ease because they don't really care if they win. They just want to get put into practice what they're doing in training all the time. And so you're not trying to take their pressure on a consistent basis. And I think that's the hardest part for me.
And was it always like this, or did it change at one point?
No, I think it was. I think there was an element of it all the time of trying to keep them process-based. You know, it's and neither right nor wrong. I mean, some coaches, they are in the game to win games. And that's where they're really motivated, and that's perfectly okay for them. It's not my motivator. So I think, and I've always been like that. Maybe that teacher part it's always been there.
Yeah. You talked about the very intense university season, and I mean, your year as a coach or soccer teacher is pretty intense. Like it's a very, very good schedule. Like there's not much time off for you, I think, or it looks like. And especially then if you have like, I mean, you coach and teach young kids and young people. They study, they have a private life. They want to probably be a very, very good soccer player. Like they have so much to do in their daily life. How's the mindset going for them, and how is it for you to help them with the mindset, and how has the mindset an impact in soccer?
Well, I think maybe one of the positive things about coaching over here is that I can really convince these young players that it is a long-term process. And I've seen it through so many cycles that you don't have to be the best at 12. You don't have to be the best at 13. If you stay consistent as a player and you're in a good environment, you will become a good player, let's say for the university level. So with young players, I'm constantly talking to them about this process, and where they're at now is not, they don't have to have this massive acceleration. It is just this process. Stay in the game, enjoy the game, just try to become marginally better all the time and try to learn all the time. And if you have to miss a practice, you miss a practice. You have to go on a school trip, go on a school trip. You're playing basketball, whatever it may be, then go for it. Because that makes you who you are.
Yeah.
And we don't have to take away pieces of who those players are just so that they're soccer players. You know, then being a footballer is great, but not everyone just wants to have that as part of their life. So just acknowledging them as more than just a player, I think is important for any young player.
And what's about the higher level then? Like how much impact has your mindset then to make the last step probably to be a professional? What do you think? You
mean from kind of that university level to the top level?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean there's there's a few players that are in everyone's program that can certainly make that jump just because they've prioritized it. The nice thing with all the players, the student athletes that I've worked with, they're so focused on their academics. They're such good students and such good people that they also put all that focus into their game and how their development is happening during their university career.
Yeah.
So it would become an easy transition for them as far as how much they have to work and the schedules they have to keep, because they're doing it as student athletes.
Yeah.
I don't know how they do it. And so it's so demanding for them. And to get top grades, which I'm fortunate that our student athletes, they do. They're just really good students. So I don't think the transition would be tough, because at the end of the day, I can talk process all the time. I can talk about those marginal gains, but they're still competitors. Like, you just can't take competition out of football.
Yeah.
People talk about, well, does it have to be so competitive? Doesn't it meant to be recreational? Once you throw a ball out, it's competing. And in the university level, they're competing all the time, and they're competing with their good friends. So you know that they're going at a top level. And I think that's a big piece of it. My job is not to teach them how to compete more, because competing is just part of the game. It's what's the process that's going to help you have success going towards the ultimate goal of the game, and that's winning a game.
Yeah. What makes it so special? I mean, I'm thinking about it a lot, because I like sport at all. I'm interested in kind of every sport. But soccer is football is kind of this sport which I said at one point, I think this is the only thing I can be busy with 24 hours a day. I think there's now other things which I probably would compare as getting close to that, but I was thinking, why is that? What makes it so special? Do you thought about that sometimes?
Yeah, and sometimes I think about, why are we doing it at all?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Because we're chasing a ball around and trying to kick it into two goals.
Yeah.
So I wonder why we do this and spend so much time on it. But it is special because I think the children and adults just love to play games. It's just human nature. And that game might be a ball sport, or it might be playing a musical instrument. There's somewhere where growth is involved, and their own improvement, their own motivation is a piece of it. And I think the fact that football, we just found what we're attracted to. And I think that football is enjoyable for the players because they see themselves grow, certainly at our university level.
Yeah.
And I think that's why every environment that I'm in, it's about creating a safe environment, as safe as the safest classroom, where they can just take on lessons and they can learn. And maybe it's safer at times than their classroom. Maybe in the classroom they're not excelling, but they can excel in a sporting environment. So that's why, as a teacher, as an educator, that our environments are important to us, because that might be the only safe place that the kid really has. And it might be the escape for a senior player who has just had a relationship breakup, or has just had a poor exam score, whatever it is. The game tends to be our place where we can escape.
That's a good point, because that's what I noticed when I thought about him. Often enough, I came also to the point, like, for me, it's often not only a sport, it's much more. Like, it was often for me a very, very safe environment, or kind of a family environment, which helped me to fill my hole, which, because my family was maybe not around, and we all spread in Europe, and I needed like a group around me, because I grew up in a group, and I noticed maybe it's also part of filling that with being part of a team. And then you go to the stadium, and I often saw like, wow, this is so emotional. When I go to my home club game, and I'm sometimes a different person, and it's like a church. Like for the 25,000 people going on Sunday in the stadium and screaming for the team, it's their religion, it's their church, and it's not just the sport. It doesn't matter if they win or lose. That's our thing.
Yeah.
and be connected to someone else who's thinking the same, have the same opinion. Yeah, I think that's what I figured out is it's much more than a sport, and we talked about it as well. Like there's a big, for me as well, I think it's a big chance for the education part, like because I mean we do that a lot, connecting the education in sports, and especially in soccer. I think there's a big opportunity to help kids in their educational way. What do you think about that?
Yeah, well, I think activity in sport certainly helps them, helps their education away from the sport as well. I think that's a big factor, where we've probably all seen young players come in who are timid, afraid of the environment, and then they come in, and 5-10 years later, you see them as adults, and they're just thriving. Whether that was a result of the soccer environment or not, I think it's got to play some sort of role in it, that they feel comfortable in going into an environment when they once weren't. And then I agree completely with you that it's that team that draws them in. Once they get that affiliation, they get that connection with some other players or with coaches, that now they feel comfortable going back to it, and they want to go back to it because that's a safe place for them.
Yeah.
And we've seen it with plenty of young players. So that's part of their growing up, their education, because now they might go into a classroom as a 14-year-old, as an 18-year-old, and feel more comfortable because they know that they can be comfortable in environments like that, something that's unknown, or where there's players that they haven't met before, or they can go to a conference and speak at a conference because they know they've felt that sort of anxiety before, and they've developed these coping mechanisms to be able to deal with it.
Yeah, you said like it can give a safe place to grow. I think that's the main part. It is, and I think that every coach or teacher who loves the sport should keep in mind. Yeah, create a safe place. Yeah, that's the best place to learn.
I mean, I honestly don't know the things that I've done in my life. I don't know how I've done them, because I was a timid, introverted kid. Had friends, of course, but really didn't like speaking in front of people. But then discovered this game. And Camilo Di Quinzio, I mean, I don't remember. Not that Camilo didn't teach me anything on the field, but the biggest piece that he taught me was him and his wife Anna and their kids. They created a family. They created an environment that you felt completely safe and you wanted to go back to. Well, then the next time you had to change teams, then that happens again. And then you just develop this ability somehow, because it's not conscious at that time, that you have these mechanisms that allow you to kind of push your boundaries. And you end up playing, I ended up playing for my province, and then playing university, and then traveling to try out for teams in Europe, back in the day where you're writing letters and there's no phones to get in touch with coaches. You're trying to line up, meet me at the train station. And I was a shy kid, and I don't know how I did that. And I probably couldn't have done it without all these built up experiences of soccer, and all the people that I met along the way.
Trust in it. Yeah.
And then moving to the West Coast to go to school, again, before the internet, and where you're getting university catalogs through the mail and in a book, and you're trying to register for courses from a distance. I don't know how I did that, because when I look back, it wasn't in my nature, and still not in my nature. Like I'm still coaching. I'm coaching all the time, speak in front of groups, and I don't know how I do it because it doesn't feel like me. But it's somewhere through this game and through this experience that I've just developed the ability that I can do it. Yeah. But I'm not conscious of how that happened. I want to be conscious of how I continue to improve, but I don't know how it happened in the past.
Yeah. It's interesting. If we look already back in the past, there's one thing which we talked about, which is pretty exciting for the whole country this year happening. Canada is the second time qualified to the World Cup. It's a bit sad, to be honest, that it's in Qatar in the winter, I would love to have the World Cup in summer, and Canada can watch it on a nice time, like not in the morning and not completely on the other way of the planet.
Yeah.
We have to wake up very early.
Yeah.
We talked about the World Cup in '86, first time Canada qualified for the World Cup, and you remember pretty much everything about that. How was the group stage for Canada back in these days?
Yeah, it was interesting because I only started playing the game in 1980, and I remember some big events because back then you only had a couple of channels that you could watch it on. There was no cable TV. So I remember watching some big games, not really remembering what they were for, learning most of what I know about sport and European football and world football was from Shoot magazines and Roy the Rover's comics that friends of mine received, and then I would barter with them to get all these comics and these magazines. I'd give them a uniform and they'd give me 100 Shoot magazines, and I get to read about all the stars. So I really didn't know much about world football.
Yeah.
But then '86 came along and we watched the qualification games, which again was tough to get on TV here. But when they qualified in Newfoundland.
Where do you live at this time? Do you remember that?
Where I lived?
Yeah.
I lived in Nova Scotia at the time in '86. Yeah, I was in my second year university.
Yeah.
And when they qualified, all these names, all these players, we used to have a Canada Soccer magazine that went out across the country. And so I'd only seen these players. There was no Nova Scotians on the team, so I'd only seen them in the magazine.
Yeah.
And then was able to watch them play. And the first game was France, and you're thinking Canada against France, and you always go when you're a young teen, you think your team's going to win.
Of course,
but when you're you're in your second year of university, you're like, more realistic if we can stay in this game.
Yeah.
And we did. We stayed in the game. We played 3 games within our group. We lost all 3, but we were in those games.
Yeah.
People will say, well, you didn't play the most attractive football. That doesn't matter because you're Canada and we're in the World Cup.
Yeah, exactly.
And I later became friends with many of those players. You moved to the West Coast. Most of them were from the West Coast. And you become friends with them and you realize that they're just guys,
just a human, just a guy like you.
Yeah, just a guy, just like the rest of us.
Yeah.
But they were really good footballers and had good careers in the old North American Soccer League that they had many years ago. But it was great to watch them play, because they were my Canadian heroes, and to see them play in the World Cup, it was exciting, and just as exciting to see this, like. You call it a new generation. I'm just an old guy, but it's just we've had good teams throughout, but this is an exciting group of players. They've got the real superstars, and then they've got the guys that are very strong in their positions and can fill roles. And then the coaching from John Herdman is fantastic. He was with the women's team, and I think we often forget that the men are back to the World Cup, but the women are doing the World Cup every single time. Yeah. And he did a great job with the women, and now he's done a fantastic job with the men, and they're exciting to watch. I don't think I've ever been, watching the calendar as often as I do with this team to make sure that I don't miss a game.
Mm-hmm. That's a perfect. Do you say segue?
Segue.
Yeah. To women's soccer, because this is. It's the main part you do, like in the summer here, and you do it in the university as well. You are the head coach of the University of Northern BC, which is in Prince George.
Yeah.
How did you figure out that women's soccer is more? Or I don't know if it's more your thing, but you ended up coaching more, teaching more in this field. How do you compare to men? And what's the difference?
Well, there's a lot in that question.
Yeah, it was more than one, sorry.
Yeah. How I fell into it, I was coaching men and women and boys and girls, and it didn't really matter. I think I was at the National Coaching Institute and went my wife and I went back to Nova Scotia, and I got a job as a technical director in a youth club. But at the same time, my old university, Dalhousie, I was going to help out a good friend who was the head coach there with the men's program. And the night before preseason started, he came to me and said, we have 3 or 4 coaches as well. But the head coach of the women's team, Neil Turnbull was his name, or is his name. Neil doesn't have an assistant right now. Would you be interested in helping Neil? So Neil was a bit of a legend. He started the women's national team. He was the first coach back in the 80s and took them through the first World Cup. And now he was coaching Dalhousie. He's from Alberta, but he was coaching at Dalhousie University in Nova Scotia. And I said, yeah, sure. But I was a little bit intimidated at the time because Neil Turnbull was a bit of a legend. He was, he was known across the country. But then Neil and I hit it off. He's such a genuine guy. And he just kind of helped me through that year. And it was the same time that he was taking over the women's national team again. And we were just chatting, and he said, well, I'm trying to put together some home training programs for the players, and they're all across the country. And I said, well, I can help with that because that's a strength of mine, that I'm good on the computer, good at design. And I just come through the National Coaching Institute. So we've just done energy systems and strength training for the full years. So I said, I'd love to help out. So he kind of passed that on to me. And then the next time a camp came around, I think I went as the equipment manager. It was this is back in the 80s, late 80s, or I guess early 90s. And I just went and helped them, did the equipment, and then you're on the field as a coach as well. So that was kind of my first step into women's soccer at the top level at the university at Dalhousie, and then with the national team. And then I just hung around Neil, because as you do, you just want to learn as much as you can. And from Neil, there was a fellow named John Walker, who was coach at University of Nebraska.
It sounds familiar for me. You want to learn as much as possible from Neil. That's what I'm trying to do as well.
Lead you astray with my crazy English coaching. And then Ian Bridge came on board, and Ian's from Victoria, and he was in that 1986 team. And we're all now, coaching in the women's side. And it was a great experience because you're learning so much from so many people. John Walker, who's coaching at, one of the top schools in the US. So he's sharing those experiences. And Ian Bridge, who's played at the top level, he's sharing his. And Neil Turnbull, who had coached at all these levels. And it was just a really good learning environment. So, we traveled around, and I continued to stay as the equipment manager, and then the equipment manager / goalkeeper coach, just so that I could be in that environment. And it was fantastic. So that's kind of how I started in women's soccer. And then when you're applying to jobs in the States, because I figured, I'm going to go to, if I'm going to go to the States, I better stay in my lane because that's what they'd want.
Yeah.
So I applied for women's programs, and then eventually got one. And then, you kind of get pigeonholed as a women's coach. But even while I was with the national team, I was coaching a men's team up in Nanaimo, and coaching boys still. Because for me, it's the same game. You approach people differently because that's what we do. We approach people based on who they are.
Yeah.
So when you're in a group of men or in a group of women, you kind of figure out who is who, and you treat them in a different manner. But you wouldn't do that much different if you were in a classroom of, let's say, grade 5s, and there was boys and girls. You're not treating you're not treating all those boys and girls completely different.
Yeah.
So it would be the same if I feel that it's the same when you're coaching men or coaching women. I would coach
still a group of individuals.
Yeah, that's right. I would not coach anything different.
Yeah.
Because you're still just you're teaching people.
Yeah.
Or you're leading people. That's what you're doing.
Yeah.
And I think we get stuck on the men and the women. John Herdman, who did an amazing job of changing around our women's national team, he then jumped to the men's national team. He's a prime case of someone who has just proven that teaching and leading is teaching and leading. Mm-hmm. And It doesn't matter what gender it is.
Yeah.
And that's the way that I feel about it. But the jobs kind of take you down. University of North Dakota women's program. Then your next job is University of Southern Cal women's program. And then you're applying for women's jobs. And then I guess in some way you get pegged as a coach that coaches only women, where I just feel like I coach football.
Yeah, and then it's probably a part of your own personality. Like if you are able to coach and teach like women or men with that opinion, and it doesn't matter. But some people probably think about it and have like their favorite. Like I'm pretty sure like that coaches sometimes say, well, I would never coach a women's team, or the other way around, because they feel more comfortable, more related to the women's soccer, and they would say, no, I would never coach a man's team.
Right. Yeah.
I think that's also a part of probably who you are then, probably, right? Like for you, probably doesn't matter.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Because for you, it's teaching and coaching and leading people.
Yeah. Because and the other part is, people would say that I'm a women's coach because that's where I coach often. We started this women's program that plays in the summer because there was 3 or maybe 4 men's programs that were operating during the summer here on Vancouver Island, and there weren't any women's programs. So we started the program so that there was opportunities for women, because men typically want to coach men because they feel like they don't relate, or they don't want to coach. They don't want to coach women. And my discussion of people say, well, you coach women and you may not understand the men's game. I think, well, I played at a pretty good level, and I've been in the men's locker room. I kind of know what it's all about. And it really just doesn't matter. But you're right. Other people have that perception, right? Yeah. They feel they pigeonhole you one way or the other. Yeah. And I don't try to convince them otherwise. It doesn't matter to me.
That's not your teaching coaching part.
Yeah, that's right. They're that's as one of my mentors says, that's their problem.
Yeah, exactly.
I just enjoy being on the field, whether it's boys, girls, men, women. It just doesn't matter, because at the same time, when we're coaching them, we're getting so much back from them. And if you just saw them as men and women and you didn't see them as individuals, well, you're getting just you're getting 2 pieces, because it's just a men's team, women's team. But if you see them as individuals, now you've got 24 different men, 24 different women, and all their attributes that just show you different things.
Yeah.
And I think that's the great piece about coaching within a team sport. You have just so many individuals, and you become close to them. You try to balance their dreams, and sometimes their dreams in the sport aren't very high. Yeah. So you're still trying to balance that.
This is why I love team sports so much, because there's this way of growing as an individual in a group. Like this is like what I really like on team sports.
Yeah.
Let's stay on women's soccer, because women's soccer is big in North America for a long time. Mm-hmm. In Europe, it grew, I would say, after the 2000s more and more. Germany built one of the strongest team in this period. And now we have like the situation, I feel like it comes even more and more interesting, and we push it to bring women's soccer on the same page like men's, which is hard, but there's a way we try, I would say. Can you imagine, because we start having women referees in men's soccer, we have men referees in women's soccer. Can you imagine at one point that we have men's and women's on the same team playing?
That would be an interesting scenario. I do think that there's plenty of women out there, thousands, tens of thousands of women that have similar abilities to men, except for the fact that physically they are different. But the ability to dribble, the ability to pass, the ability
I mean,
decide.
I'm following the European European Championship.
You say that now because Germany's in the final.
No. Well, I'm following it. I watch a lot of games, not only Germany. Well, yeah, pretty strong performance yesterday.
Yes.
And I really like to watch it, and the level how they play is fantastic to watch, and it's fantastic to see how they perform. It's stunning.
Yeah.
So that's why I'm asking, because I mean, it was probably 15, 20 years ago already, also like somehow, but now it's more visual for us because we push it more. It's more. There's more access to watch.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. And there's bigger crowds. I mean, they're filling the stadiums. Even some of the club games are filling the stadium in some countries now. You know, in Europe, it's the women's game is growing so fast. I mean, it's going to be exciting to see, even just in the next 5 years, where it grows to. And I think when I said physically, I mean physically is also the ability for players to make decisions and to execute those decisions, the techniques they use. But I think the physical side that's different is just the speed, power, strength that would make it very difficult for women to play in the men's game at the top level. But if all those things were equal, then I think the players have the ability. I mean, the changes in the women's game in Europe, especially, you watch those games, and they're just class as far as how they play the game. And it did start. You know, the U.S. were so strong for a long time because of university soccer down there. You know, it really gave the motivation for players to play, and of course, it was very athletic, and the American players were stronger and faster than many of the other countries around the world. And sport was, you know, it's acceptable for women to play. They didn't have any of those barriers. Now we have to remember that Norway won the World Cup in '95. Sweden was a top team. Germany was a top team, and we did have European countries that were top. But now you look at the Netherlands and France and Spain, and they're just
England, in
England, they're just at a top level, and you know, they're not playing like the men; they're playing football, and it's the same sport. So they're just doing it at a very, very high level now as the game just continues to improve, and there's more motivators for women to stay in the game longer. Than it's just going to keep getting better, because that was a barrier for a long time that there was this expectation, much like we talked about in the Canadian sport, that you finish your university and then you go out and work, because there were no opportunities. And that's what was happening with women and professional soccer. And now there's opportunities. Yeah. When I was working with Neil Turnbull in Canada in the late 90s, going to the World Cup, and you know, you had students, or you had players that were police officers during the day, and then they were footballers at night, and they lived across the country, or they worked in, you know, they had a 9-to-5 job, and then they played soccer at night, and then they were coming together to play in a World Cup. And that's not a good recipe for continued improvement. But the game has changed so much since then, and it's been exciting to watch all the changes in women's soccer and see where it's at now, because those Euros are amazing. Yeah, exactly, absolutely. How is your impact in that because you started Epic? What is Epic? Is it a business? Is it how would you explain it? Well, I suppose it's a business. Because we started it as a business to run academies, to run programs to supplement club training. Yeah. And at certain times of the year, there was no club training, no club competitions on Vancouver Island. So we kind of filled a gap with an academy. And we grew up to about 240 players training in the spring and early summer with us. But it was started because we had a desire to work in that environment, and Epic as a name was over the years kind of trying to figure out what your philosophy is as a coach. That's what I ended up boiling down my philosophy to be. You know, it wasn't about, well, we need to be, and I think 20 years ago it would have been, well, I believe in possession football. I believe that we should defend in this way. That was my philosophy. But now the philosophy was around Epic. It was around creating a safe environment, a good environment for training. It was about being patient, because you have to understand that it's a long-term process with players, that what you're trying to do is have them be independent footballers, because if they're not, then you're constantly on the sideline telling them what to do, where to go. And we see the end results of that at times at the university level, where players don't make decisions because they've been kind of remote controlled. And then be consistent on a Wednesday in training, just like the same that you would be on a Saturday when you get to game time. Like, it's not Jekyll and Hyde. Be consistent in that environment. And if you're talking development on a Wednesday, you better keep living development on a Saturday when you're in the middle of a game. And so that kind of that's boiled down to my philosophy, my kind of teaching and coaching philosophy.
Yeah.
And so when we started the business, it was almost just, for me, it was like no brainer. I like this name, and it just kind of fell together, and we just built it from there. And then we tried a number of camps. All we tried to do was build opportunities, and then build coach education or coach support for local clubs. And we just really tried to create opportunities that weren't here on the island. We do a college ID camp where we bring in coaches from all over the country and the US. And that was a 2-hour project one night where we were just sitting around. What else can we do? What opportunities are players on the Vancouver Island missing? And we came up with this idea. I contacted coaching friends across the country and in the NCAA. And I said, would you be interested in coming up if we can get the players? Yes.
Yeah.
And the next day we secured facilities, and the camp was born. And now we're 8 years into it.
Yeah.
And there's been hundreds of kids that go through it and on their way to university. But Epic was about creating those opportunities, and been fortunate to do it with some fantastic people. And then we keep changing as the soccer environment changes, but we keep going.
Nice. How do you see Epic in a couple, like growing is it growing? Is it, what's the goal with it in the next couple of years?
Good question. I don't think we've sat down to put a goal on it, but it does constantly change, because we talked about the consistency in Europe. We know what the pathway is. Well, the pathway here on Vancouver Island changes almost every year. Everyone's trying to do the right thing and changing leagues and the timing of leagues and all of that sort of thing, which is great because they're trying to find that sweet spot that really works for the development of the game. So we're having to develop as well with that. And during the summer, we started to do these high-performance camps. And these high-performance camps weren't about getting the best players. They're about helping any player at any level just become that little bit better. So it's at their level of performance, their level of high performance. And I really enjoyed some of the things we were able to do in classroom and on the field as part of an educational package. So now I'm thinking about, well, how can we continue with that and create stages of that development depending on their age and their level. And those would be fun. That would be a nice evolution of Epic, and still supplement or complement the other training that they're getting.
Yeah.
So we're having to change, but some of the ways that we're changing, and because we continue to develop as individuals. I mean, I try to improve myself or falsify what I'm doing in previous years, and as I continue to improve, I see these new ideas for what we can do for players, and that's always that's enjoyable for me, because as I try to teach them, they're also teaching me new things.
Oh yeah, if you see it from this side, yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Not everybody can see that and is able to be open with that, but that's exactly that's why I always try to explore with every encounter I have, because you can learn from everybody. If it's just the guy who's running around with a dog, and then your encounters are you've been traveling and meeting people. I mean, I have to do the same. Is continue to talk to people on the island, but also go away and learn from others, and then come back and see how we can connect it with the things that we're doing. And I think that's a part of our journey anyway, as individuals, is not to repeat the same year, 20, 30, 40 years, Yeah.
But it's to figure out, well, what can be different? And if you're in the same environment, so we've been here for 11 years back on Vancouver Island, I'm hoping that I had 11 different years. Because if it was exactly the same, then
would you say so?
I think it has been different, yeah. And some things, external factors have changed that. If you've been throwing a curveball, so you have to adjust to it. But then, I think because I continue to want something a little bit different and to continue to change, that's kind of my driving force of reading and watching video and talking to people that I don't want it to be the same.
It's interesting. It reminds me I was playing in school the theater, and we had a play in my last grade, and I had a small role, a guy in the crowd, and he had one sentence, and he said, I tried to translate it in English. The sentence was, standing still is kind of dying. And I think it's exactly how we humans are, how we are, because we need improvement. We need changes from time to time. If we stand still for too long, we kind of dying in ourselves, because that's not us. That's not how we build up. Yeah. We're looking for progress. Whatever that means, and everyone defines that a little bit differently. But we're looking to progress. In some of our progress we know worldwide and takes us in a negative direction, and may improve life in one way, but it hurts the planet or hurts life in another way. But I think it's everyone's trying to progress. That could be financially, it could be just your own intellect, could be anything. Absolutely.
But you're right. Most people are not standing still. They're trying to figure out what the next thing is.
So, because you said the word encounter, this is where's my podcast most about it. Do you remember one very, very special encounter in your whole coaching, teaching life, which taught you kind of something which you remember now when you think about who was a very, very interesting encounter that had probably a big impact to your life? I mean, there's probably a lot, I know.
Yeah, there is a lot.
If I would get this question, I don't know, there's a lot.
Yeah. And I do think you get it after the fact. You figure it out after.
Oh, yeah.
Which is what I often say about coaching and teaching, is that, and it's probably the same with parenting. You're constantly trying to teach, but you don't know until 10 years down the road if someone has learned something, because you don't know if they're learning at the time. So I think everything is kind of retrospect. But when I look back, I can't pick one, not on the spot. That would take a lot of reflection. But there are some amazing experiences that I've had that have been really tough at times. But when I see the end result of people, because you've tried to create safe environments, or you've tried to help them as footballers if that's what they've wanted, or you've let them go freely if they've not wanted to be, so that they could pursue what they really wanted. There's plenty of those, and I think it goes back to that earlier comment that the players give you more than you give them, because again, there's 24 of them giving to you, and you're just one person giving to them. But many of those encounters they just keep you going, and they keep you smiling when the player who is underrated and never played at a good level is doing wonderful things against players that were rated the highest in the province, or maybe even in the country, and they can do things, and you're just giggling because you know that they're feeling so good about their experiences. Or players that have had difficulties with one thing or another, and you see them thriving after university, and you know that it wasn't you, but you're part of their journey, and what part you played, you don't know. But those are really the encounters that I think, when I look back, are the most meaningful. I don't remember scores and things like that. It takes sometimes I really have to someone has to jog my memory what the score was, or how the game went, or who scored. But the fact that the players, feel good about themselves at the end, and they've changed. I mean, that's really why I do it.
Nice. thank you very much. Thank you for letting me ask you all these questions.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you for having me around for the last couple of weeks and months and let me learn, teaching me a bit for all these connections which you made for me, which gave me the chance to stay here for a bit and learn from others as well while you going to UMBC in Prince George. I talked with a lot of people in the last couple of weeks and often also about you, and because they ask who you are, what I'm doing, and I always say, I'm sticking around Neil and try to learn. And the feedback was very, very stunning because like everybody was like, oh yeah, this is the right guy to learn from. This is the person you have to stick around if you want to learn to coach in this area. And I think this is the sentence which I finish here is one person also said, this is probably one of the best coaches in the country. I think you don't probably notice that. This is your strength. This is your that makes you even greater, I would say. And I'm happy to have you here in my podcast and had this nice conversation.
Yeah. Well, thank you for that. Yeah, because it's hard for me to think that because I'm just a guy that's coaching.
Exactly.
Coaching and learning and hopefully growing. And having people around that are interested is what it's what I love. You know, the fact that we can talk football, we can talk development, that's what I love to do.
Yeah.
To share what I've learned and to continue to learn from others I think that's the reason that I stay in the game, you know, because the other choice is you go find a 9-to-5 job and you do the same thing over and over and over again, which is okay because people do that. And sometimes I wonder if that would be a great opportunity just to switch off.
Yeah.
But it's you'd miss all these encounters. You'd miss, you know, being in a Westphalia, having a conversation, you know, looking at the ocean.
Yeah.
You'd miss those things if you were too locked into protecting what you have and not entrusting other people to be around. So I'm glad we met up in Whitehorse, that we connected. And thanks, it was Travis that connected us through the email. Travis, he's our club administrator up there. So I'm glad that connection was made and that you're down here and we can continue kind of this football and life journey.
Yeah, we will. And we will stay in contact. And thanks again. And I think the perfect sentence to close this episode is trust the people around you.
Yeah, that's great. That's
Thanks.
good.
Thanks for listening.
Welcome to another round of Boardroom or Miro Board. Today we talk retrospectives with Agile coach Maria. Let's go. First question. You've spent 2 hours in a team retro, but the only input you've heard is Dave's. Boardroom or mirror board?
Boardroom. In Miro, Dave can't hog the space because everyone can add thoughts anonymously, online, at the same time.
Correct. Next. You need the team to act on feedback fast, so you turn all those retro notes into Jira tasks instantly.
Miro all the way. And I can assign those tasks to teammates.
You're nailing this. Now, you see hundreds of sticky notes from the retro. A real mess. But you organize them into 5 themes in just seconds.
Miro, I basically get back an entire hour when I use its AI tools for clustering.
And she's done it.
Join over 60 million people running actually enjoyable and actionable retros in Miro. Get your first 3 boards free at Miro.com. That's Miro.com.